After taking care of the paralyzed CEO for 2 years, he recovered. The first thing he did was propose to the white moon in his heart, who'd abandoned. The media called it a love story, a sticking together through thick and thin. Finally tying the knot. I tilted my head to watch the love proposal on the big square screen, silent. Then I pulled the ring from my pocket and dropped it into the trash can. At last, I'd repaid the debt of gratitude I owed him. People on the pedestrian street stopped in their tracks, craning their necks to watch the live proposal broadcast on the outdoor screens. It wasn't just he. Every available big screen in City C had switched to the same feed. The footage was sharp enough to catch the faint glimmer of tears in the heroine's eyes. The scene set up bore Thomas's touch. In the months before he fully recovered, he'd spent all his time sketching these plans. Even the firework designs were handled by his own hand. Back then, he'd held the back of my neck, his fingertips cold, and asked what flowers I liked. Hyacinths. But on the screen, the entire proposal site was drowned in a sea of vibrant roses, and the heroine standing there wasn't me. It was Thomas's ex-girlfriend, the celebrity designer Amanda. I stared up calmly as the proposal reached its climax. Thomas knelt on one knee, and the diamond ring in the black velvet box sparkled like a star. Compared to that, the ring in my pocket hardly qualified as one at all. The girls beside me squealed excitedly. CEO Thomas of Group A. That slicked back hair is killing me. No wonder they used to call him City C's Playboy. Looks like this Playboy's finally met his match. I heard that during the 2 years Thomas was paralyzed, Amanda put aside all her work to take care of him. Fairy tale love, finally coming true. I silently pinched my wrist, where faint grayish-brown scars still lingered, leftovers from caring for Thomas back then. Amanda had broken up with Thomas and fled to Milan for further studies. The crowd held its breath as the proposal hit its most critical momentum. Ed bowed her head, looking at the man kneeling before her, and said through tears, "I do." The ring slid onto her ring finger. Thomas stood up and kissed her lips. In that instant, fireworks exploded over all of City C. Such a spectacle no doubt the whole country knew by now. It fit Thomas's personality, though whoever he loved, he had to shout it to the world. The crowd erupted. The girl next to me, totally invested, clutched my wrist, trying to contain her excitement. They're such a perfect match, aren't they? Enduring the pain in my wrist, I smiled. Perfect. She noticed my pale face, realized belatedly, and let go, starting to apologize, but I'd already turned and walked away amid the noise behind me. The screen showed the couple kissing passionately. The crowd screamed for their love, and fireworks burst into brilliant blooms. I stopped suddenly beside a trash can, squatted down to catch my breath for a moment, then stood up again, pulling a dull ring from my pocket. It was ugly, too loose, and thank goodness, I no longer needed to keep it. I dropped it into the trash. I'd never felt so calm. Not a single tear fell. From now on, I'd repaid everything: what I owed the Tudor family, what I owed Thomas. I was kicked out of Group A. I'd once had a private office, but now, not even a desk to my name. HR threw a cardboard box at me. "Special assistant," all your things are in here. I'd had a good rapport with people in the company, so she lowered her voice. "Thomas personally ordered you to leave. The compensation will be sufficient. Just go quickly." Her tone was still too kind. I suspected Thomas's original words were "get out," leaning back in his chair, casual as ever, not taking me seriously at all. I strained to carry the box, passing my former office. I saw its new owner. It had been converted into Amanda's lounge, with scattered design sketches left casually around. Intimate photos of her and Thomas covered the once crowded schedule chart. I lowered my eyes, my knuckles, gripping the edge of the box, turned white for a moment. Then I let go. Forget it. At the company entrance, I was jostled and fell. The box tipped over, spilling its contents everywhere. Too many people had gathered. Someone else's high heel stepped on the back of my hand. A sharp, piercing pains warming reporters, and the crowd surged in one direction. Gritting through the pain, just in time to see Andy appear arm in arm with the man she loved. Dread, her black hair and red dress stood out. But the man beside her was even more dazzling. Thomas hated crowds. He turned his head away, a little irritable, but still carefully shielded Amanda in his arms. Reporters surrounded Amanda, holding out microphones, firing questions one after another. "Amanda, the Century proposal has topped the charts online for a week as the heroine. What do you have to say?" Amanda smiled brightly. I'm grateful that during the 2 years of his life when he was at his lowest, I was the one who stayed by his side all along. Thomas had always had smooth sailing, standing at the top. Until the car accident left him paralyzed those 2 years, everyone deserted him. He tasted the coldness of the world. Anyone had more right to say that than Amanda. Back then, she'd just gotten on a plane and left. Only me had remained by Thomas's side. Such an obvious lie. But Thomas seemed pleased, didn't refute it, even indulged her. Thomas lowered his eyes, looking at Amanda gently like a wildfire that, after raging, finally meets a river and calms down. Strobes flashed and shutters clicked as entertainment reporters eagerly captured the moment. The two stared lovingly into each other's eyes. Thomas suddenly turned his head, looking past the crowd to lock eyes with me. His gaze was almost icy. I watched him quietly, a faint smile on my lips. Feeling unburdened, he frowned instinctively. In truth, I too was grateful for those 2 years of his lowest point. I'd stayed by Thomas's side. My debt of care was fully repaid. The taxi I'd been waiting for was slow to arrive. A wave of hypoglycemia and stomachicae hit. I crouched by the roadside, clutching my stomach. The hand that had been stepped on was swollen and bleeding, throbbing with pain. Amanda really was special to Thomas. I'd known Thomas a long time. He'd been the Tudor family's golden heir since childhood, and as an adult, he'd had countless affairs. But Amanda was the only girlfriend he'd ever publicly acknowledged. A broken mirror mended. It made sense. A car horn blared in front of me. I looked up instinctively. A black car had stopped beside me. The window rolled down, revealing Thomas's lazy face, his knuckles tapping the steering wheel. Stomachicae again? My lashes fluttered. He scoffed, his tone mocking and disdainful. Serves you right. I lowered my eyes. It was like stepping back 2 years. This was how Thomas used to treat me. Back then, he'd been just as cruel. He said my very existence was a mercy. Now I understood. All those tender moments later were an act. He'd been afraid I'd leave, that no one else would care for him. I chose to ignore him. Behind me, the click of high heels approached. Amanda walked around me, sliding into the passenger seat, pouting. Ash, I'm late. Those reporters are relentless. I shouldn't have let you go ahead. Could have helped shield me. As she buckled her seatbelt, Amanda glanced sideways and saw me. Her voice faltered. Her face paling, she hurried, urging. Ash, let's go. I'll be late for the gala. Thomas frowned, seemingly annoyed. Biting back the pain, I looked up at Thomas, figuring this would be the last time we spoke. I watched the engagement live stream. The venue was even more beautiful than your sketches. Everything was perfect, except for the lack of hyacinths. I hesitated, then added, congratulations, may you live happily ever after. Thomas's smile faded. His hand resting on the windowsill tightened in an instant, veins standing out white against his skin. As if he hadn't heard a blessing at all, that hand wore a wedding band. I dropped my gaze, avoiding his stare. Amanda fell silent, then spoke softly. Ash, it's getting late. No need to waste time on someone irrelevant. A cold voice sounded above me. Thomas said. Emily, don't regret this. He waited, but when no reply came, he scoffed, restarted the engine, and sped off with a press of the gas pedal. I looked up, dazed, catching only the tail of the black car, reminding me of how he used to race his sports car. Even a blessing from me would inexplicably infuriate Thomas. He was irrational, but I'd never regret it. The taxi still hadn't come. Resigning myself, I was about to stand when my phone vibrated. A message popped up. Concise, where are you? Hesitating, I sent my location. Half an hour later, I sat in a commercial vehicle, stiffly extending my hand as the young man in front of me bent his head to tend to my wound. John looked up. Does it hurt? I tensed whenever he moved. Shaking my head, John lowered his head, blowing gently on my hand. The cool air made me curl my fingers slightly. I widened my eyes, repeating, I said it doesn't hurt. John released my hand, drawling. Didn't hear you. I felt like a disloyal servant consorting with the enemy. As Thomas's longtime subordinate, I'd seen him clash with John more times than I could count. From schoolyard fights to business wars, they'd always been sworn rivals. Especially during Thomas's 2 years of paralysis, John had nearly swallowed up all his assets. Even though I had no ties to Thomas now, old habits died hard. John leaned back lazily. There's Sigala tonight. I'm short at 8. I kept my eyes down. My wound now bandaged. Will Thomas be there? John hummed in assent. I avoided his gaze. Speaking after a long pause, if you're trying to use me to hurt Thomas, you'll probably be disappointed. He doesn't care about me. My voice was soft, stating facts calmly. John toyed with a lighter, a flash of flame briefly illuminating his knuckles. You never know. I turned to watch the streetlight blur past the window. Smiling faintly, it made me think of Thomas at 17. Laughing boldly and scornfully in front of all his friends, he said, I'd never in a million years like Emily. John stayed with me as I had my hair done and tried on dresses. He was picky, dismissing over a dozen high-end gowns. I didn't want to go to the gala, but I couldn't refuse John 2 weeks ago. When I left the tutors, they'd forbidden me to take anything. It was Mrs. Percy who'd taken me in temporarily. So I'd try to meet John's requests when I tried on a silver white gown, its skirt flowing like a galaxy. John's gaze finally lingered. His Adam's apple bob, this one. I looked at the mirror beside me, stunned. The reflection was strange yet familiar, stunningly beautiful. It was like the plain girl who'd long lingered silently behind Thomas, suddenly transformed into someone radiant. I'd never seen myself like this, reaching out. I touched the cool glass cautiously. John stepped behind me. A necklace dangling from his fingers. He leaned close to fasten it. His breath warm against my skin, his voice casual. Emily, this isn't about provoking them. Just letting Thomas know he's not just been paralyzed. He's been blind. It was my first time at such a business gala. After all these years by Thomas's side, I'd never once been his date. John and I arrived late, just before entering the ballroom. I looked up at him. The ballroom lights hit his profile in a sudden glow. His jawline sharpened, striking, almost dazzling. A murmur of admiration rippled around us, jolting me back to reality. Who's the girl with John? They look perfect together. John never brings a date. What's going on? A man who'd always been close to Thomas stared at me for a moment, then suddenly cursed. Fuck me, that's not old Lou's plain little assistant. Is it? No sooner had the words left his mouth than I heard the crash of a wine glass shattering on the floor. I followed the sound. Thomas stood nearby. His wine glass shattered on the floor, the liquid soaking the train of Amanda's dress. Amanda let out a small shriek, but he paid her no mind, fixing his gaze on me as if seeing me for the first time, a hint of stunned bewilderment in his eyes. This version of me seemed to surprise and alienate him. Anna looked up, staring at me for a moment before recognition, and she looked utterly incredulous. I nodded politely, then turned to mingle with John. Thomas finally noticed the man beside me, his fox-like eyes cooled by degrees as he strode over. Reaching out to yank me toward him, John reacted quickly, blocking his hand and pulling me gently behind him. Thomas looked past John at me. Melly, come here. I'd never taken sides against him before, let alone hidden behind someone else. Once, I would have run to him no matter how far he called. But now, things were different. I didn't step back. My voice was as calm and steady as it had always been when speaking to him. Soft but clear. I'd done enough these past years. A midsummer breeze swept through the open window. Thomas. We're done. His face drained of color instantly. Midsummer is a season for meetings. I was a child sponsored by the Tudor family. Not just me, our entire county, after the earthquake, had been rebuilt with the help of Thomas's mother. But my first visit to the Tudor household was at 15. I'd been the top scorer in the county's high school entrance exams that year, and I'd accompanied local officials, carrying specialty gifts to thank Mrs. Tudor. Mrs. Tudor was as gentle as I'd imagined, chatting with the officials about next year's plans while fielding countless phone calls. She seemed endlessly busy standing off to the side. I caught a glimpse of a photo on her desk, the boy, and it was around my age, with delicate features, looking at the camera with a hint of impatience. He looked as arrogant as a prince. The butler suddenly knocked. His expression rubbled. Madam. The young master's gone motorcycle racing again. Mrs. Tudor, distracted, nodded casually. Go bring him back. The butler wore a troubled expression. It seemed like a difficult task. One of the local officials nudged me forward, chuckling awkwardly. Mrs. Tudor. Let Emily come along, she gets on well with kids her age. Mrs. Tudor's gaze finally fell on me. I curled my fingers, mustering courage, and nodded. I can do it. Even if I couldn't, I had to. I followed the butler to Westring Mountain Road, where Thomas was. He was only 17 then, but already tall and straight. A black and red motorcycle raced toward me, skidding to a stop just before reaching me. He lifted his helmet with a knuckle, revealing narrow eyes. Lazy and lit a country bumpkin, little sister. He said, "Who are you?" I shut my eyes, my face pale. I thought I was going to be run over. After a moment to steady myself, I answered, "I'm Emily." He looked amused my second sentence. I added, "Is that Mrs. Tudor wants me to take you home?" His expression cooled. Thomas wasn't one to obey, but I was stubborn. If he wouldn't leave, I wouldn't either. I waited by the roadside. He circled back once. Saw me still there, circled again. Still there in the third loop. Probably feeling ridiculous, he tossed his bike aside in irritation and led me back. I followed behind him, thinking how tall he was. The midsummer evening wind blew past us. I thought of his name. Thomas. Mrs. Tudor, wanting someone his age to keep an eye on him, asked me to stay as Thomas's little shadow, helping her make sure he didn't get into trouble. Thomas, in his rebellious teens, resented me deeply. Seeing me as his mother's spy, he teased me constantly. But I'd wipe away my tears and keep following. Eventually, he stopped caring. In Thomas's words, "She's so damn annoying." Everyone knew it. Though Thomas had countless flings, there was always a plain, almost invisible girl by his side, stepping in only when he was up to no good. I studied hard, did my best to meet Mrs. Tudor's expectations, stayed close behind Thomas. For 7 or 8 years, but I kept a secret to myself. The year I finished the college entrance exam, I stood under the jacaranda tree while Thomas leaned against the courtyard railing. He spoke casually, but his words felt like a hand clamping down on my heart. Peeling away my secret, he said, "You like me?" I froze, unable to move for a long time. Jacaranda petals fell on me. It took ages before I heard my own voice, hoarse and rough. "Yes, I like you." Thomas smiled faintly, then turned and left. That night when I went to find Thomas, I pushed open the door to the private room and heard the Tudor heir, reclined on the sofa, laughing wildly. His voice wasn't loud, but it left me deafened. Not just my ears, every part of me ached. "Who'd like Emily?" "I like girls like Amanda." That was the first time I'd heard Amanda's name. I was 2 years below Thomas. To get into his university sooner, I'd skipped a grade in high school. But in that moment I suddenly understood. Some things can't be chased down with effort. The 15-year-old Emily who'd first met Thomas would never have imagined that years later, our relationship would still be this strained, even clashing at someone else's gala. Especially since this was Thomas's first gala after recovery. He and John had always hated each other. Their arrival alone had drawn attention. Now, with them facing off, everyone watched openly or in secret, eager for a show. I tugged at John's sleeve, murmuring, "Let's go." Thomas's lashes fluttered. It was the first time in all these years he'd heard me say "let's go" to someone else while he was there. We walked far before I glanced back. Thomas still stood there, head bowed, fragile, cold, like the day 2 years ago when he'd woken from the car crash. His mother, who'd been in the car with him, was already gone. Amanda lifted her dress, reaching to touch him, but his glance over his shoulder froze her in place. I smiled faintly. John raised an eyebrow. "What's funny?" I whispered, just realizing. Not everyone can do it. Not everyone can stand Thomas's cold moods and princely tantrums. Not everyone, after seeing his other side, chooses to stay, especially during his paralysis. Thomas, a child of fortune, couldn't accept being crippled. He stopped laughing, his spirit died. And his only family, Mrs. Tudor, had died in that crash. Back then, Thomas had no will to live, trying to kill himself again and again. I smashed a glass, picked up a shard, and sliced hard at my wrist. "You want to die? Fine. I'll go with you." Thomas had never seen such ruthlessness in me. His dark eyes stared for a long time, then he ground out a promise. "Emily, I'll get better." After that, he cooperated with doctors, Finally standing 2 years later, then he discarded his wheelchair. After the gala, John and I returned to Percy's place. Grandma Percy had taken me in these past few weeks. I was already drafting resumes. Once I found a job, I'd move out. Truth was, John and I barely knew each other. Our only interactions, after Thomas and he fought. I'd go to Percy's to apologize for Thomas. Grandma Percy always received me warmly, fanning herself with a palm leaf fan. "Oh, it's fine, boys will fight. Little girl, sit a while." I'd stay all afternoon, awkwardly watching her rub medicinal oil on John's wounds. As afternoon sunlight spilled over the floor, it only made me feel more guilty. Never did I think I'd end up here, saved by Percy. Neither John nor I was talkative, so the car ride was eerily quiet. I sat rigid as a schoolchild, too prim to look around. So I stared ahead only to meet John's gaze in the rearview mirror. He seemed tired, long lashes fluttering over closed eyes. Neon light flashed across his face. John opened his eyes. Sharp, catching me staring through the mirror. A little awkward, but not much. I looked away. John suddenly laughed. "Emily," he said. "Know what I thought when I first saw you? How could I forget?" He'd shouted it right in front of Thomas. I nodded. "You asked how I was blind to follow Thomas around like that." Thomas had flown into a rage, fighting him again. John shook his head, closing his eyes once more. Outside, cars streamed by. Endless the silence stretched so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then his voice came, soft. "I thought she's so obedient." It had been ages since I'd visited Mrs. Tudor. I brought a bouquet of white flowers to the cemetery. Thomas had just taken over Group A when an out-of-control truck hit the Tudors' car. Mother and son, one dead, one injured. She was a kind woman. Without her, I didn't know where I'd be. I cleared weeds from her grave, chatting to her softly. "Mrs. Tudor, the charity work you cared about is still going strong, growing even. The foundation gets so many thank you letters, they fill a whole room now." I lowered my eyes, watching a dead-dripped eater on a flower petal. "Thomas's paralysis is gone." He is no different from before. Group A's back on track. He is engaged now. Media's making a huge fuss, calling it the wedding of the century. You know the bride, Amanda. The girl Thomas brought home. They ray happy. Everything's getting better. Only me. After all these years, stuck in place. No direction. The woman in the tombstone photo looked gentle. As if listening, I touched the picture. "I quit Group A, would you blame me?" Of course, she didn't answer. The cemetery was silent. Death has no voice. I buried my face in my hands, tears seeping through my fingers. Except for those first few days, I'd never been happy here. Sometimes I'd think, if only I hadn't scored first in the high school entrance exam that year, I'd never have come here. I cried quietly for a while before gathering my things to leave. When I stood up, I noticed someone standing not far away. Watching, who knows for how long. I lowered my eyes. There was only one path out of the cemetery. So I had to walk past Thomas. He'd probably come to visit Mrs. Tudor too, just bad luck that we ran into each other. I was brushing past him when Thomas spoke. "Crying at my mother's grave, you?" The more mocking words died on his lips as I turned, lifting my eyes. Tears pooled at the corners of my eyes, unspilled. Thomas swallowed the rest. Truth was, Thomas and I hadn't always been this bad. This kind of venom had only flared twice. Once, when I'd grown tired of being his special assistant and secretly sent out new resumes. He'd flown into a rage when he found out, and once, not long ago, when he'd received an email, then kicked me out of the Tudor house. One before the crash, one after. 2 years apart, but I wasn't as hurt as I'd been back then. I just looked at him quietly, asking for the girl I'd been long ago. "Thomas, is it because I never showed my feelings in front of you that you really think I can't hurt? Did you really believe that no matter how recklessly you acted, I'd stay behind you forever? Just like when I was 15? Thomas pressed his lips together. His gaze pitch black. The hand hanging at his side curled and uncurled. Then clenched tight. He lifted the corner of his mouth in a sneer. "Emily," he said. "You'll never pay it back. You killed my mother. Stop pretending." By the time I left, my head was still muddled. Thomas had looked down at me, tossing one last sentence, "That crash wasn't an accident." Guess who betrayed the Tudors? An email landed in my inbox. I clicked it, hands shaking. Inside were files Thomas's men had gathered, clues suggesting the crash had been deliberate. Mrs. Tudor and Thomas had been on their way to sign a major contract. Their whereabouts those days were strictly confidential. Except to me, only me. As Thomas's special assistant, raised in the Tudor household, I'd always been trusted. There was a photo. Me meeting with someone from the rival group. The timestamp was damning. Right before the crash, but the photo was doctored. I didn't even know that person in Thomas's eyes. I was the only leak. He hadn't even bothered to question me in person before condemning me to death. I laughed bitterly, curling into the car seat. No wonder the man who'd drawn up the proposal plans one day had told me to get out the next. No wonder he'd rather chase a man back than have anything to do with me. I closed the email. No urge to defend myself. I knew Thomas wouldn't listen. If only he'd dug deeper, instead of stopping here. He would have found out. He would have known I wasn't the only one who knew his whereabouts. Amanda knew too. I slept longer than I had in ages. Even before Thomas's crash, I'd been secretly sending out resumes. Amanda had grown too aggressive, and I was just tired. She was the only official girlfriend Thomas had ever had. Spoiled rotten back then, and she'd hated me with a passion. I dealt with his flings before, but none as vicious as her. Can you imagine a girl in her early 20s being publicly slut-shamed in front of the entire company? Amanda did that. It was during the days Thomas was negotiating the contract. His and Mrs. Tudor's whereabouts were secret, even from Amanda. She couldn't reach Thomas, but I knew where he was. She asked. I refused to tell her, even blocked her from entering his office. The whole company knew she was Thomas's favorite, only I dared to stop her. Amanda called people over to watch, then slapped me across the face. This is what she said, Emily. Even if you stripped naked in front of Thomas, he wouldn't spare you a glance. Get out of my way. You think clinging to the Tudors to escape your poor county will make you a lady? Following Thomas around like this, disgusting. You're no better than a homewrecker. I'd done nothing wrong. Yet under everyone's eyes, I felt as humiliated as if I'd been stripped bare. She forced her way into the office, saw Thomas's schedule. The next day, Thomas and his mother were in an accident. I'd never suspected Amanda. Thomas and Mrs. Tudor had been so kind to her. Now I understood. Only those unloved take care to memorize others' kindness, scrambling to pay it back. I was that kind of person when I woke. The world had turned upside down. The top trending topic on Weibo was Tudor family crash conspiracy. People loved gossip about wealthy families, especially after Thomas's century proposal had dominated headlines. An insider claimed the crash hadn't been an accident, but a premeditated attack by the rival group. The leak, they said, was Thomas's then special assistant Girl the Tudors had sponsored for years. Attached was that photo of me with the rival group, the same one from my email. The expose was so detailed, it sounded like first-hand testimony. Amanda responded to, much milder now, smiling softly on camera, Emily? I never liked her, but she kept following Ash around. I even fought with Ash because of her. Never thought she'd do something like this. The interview dragged on, every word painting me as a homewrecker. A traitor, a classic ungrateful poor girl in a wealthy family drama. Thomas stood nearby, his expression indifferent. I dread the online comments, raised that assistant for years. And she turns out to be such an ungrateful wretch. Mrs. Tudor would be heartbroken. Amanda's so pitiful. Back then, she had to put up with that assistant just to date Thomas. Someone call the police. She shouldn't get away with this. Who can find out where she is? Would any company even dare hire her? Gotta say, Thomas and Amanda getting this far. So not easy. Fairy tale love. Really? Someone suddenly plucked the phone from my hand. I looked up to find John staring at my pale face's top, reading. Grandma's calling for dinner. My lips moved, trying to explain, it wasn't me. John didn't even pause. I know. Not a perfunctory reply. He truly believed me. Just like the netizens said, interviewers who'd seemed eager to hire me now turned me down one after another. If I couldn't wash off this stigma, I'd probably be socially ruined forever. Never finding work again. This was the end Thomas wanted for me. Miserable enough to satisfy his anger, only Percy's company still offered me a job. I'd applied to them in my mass applications, but I declined. John flipped through my resume, not looking up as he asked. Why? I shook my head. With my reputation now, showing up at any company would drag them into the spotlight. It's not good for Percy. John turned, studying me quietly for a moment, then smiled faintly. Helplessly, Emily. You're so slow. Slow about what? I stared at him, belatedly processing. But before I could answer, the police arrived to take me away. The tutors had filed a report. As a person involved and suspect in the old case, I had to be questioned. Before entering the interrogation room, I saw Thomas and Amanda. Their expressions were telling. Amanda looked like a gambler going all in. I understood in a way. Over 2 years, she'd cleaned up her tracks well enough. Any evidence would have long vanished. I was the last hurdle between her and Thomas. Once I was locked up, she'd be truly safe. Not just the century proposal, but a century wedding to follow. She'd be the envied Mrs. Liu. Admired by all. Thomas's gaze on me was complicated. His jaw tight. I noticed his fingers stroking his fingertips unconsciously. Trembling slightly, he glanced at me. Then looked away, the corners of his eyes red. I averted my gaze and walked into the interrogation room. In a few hours, the police had gone through every detail of my life beyond that photo. More evidence pointed to me coincidental. Meticulous, like a net woven to strangle me. I was detained temporarily, just 10 days. The Tudor crash had blown up online. Conspiracy theories spread too fast to contain. The case drew high-level attention. So police resources were poured in, vowing to be fair. To miss no clue those 10 days. I thought of nothing for the first time in ages. I rested properly, sleeping deeply. Day and night. On the 10th day, the case cleared up. I was acquitted. This time, the wanted list included not just the gang-linked rivals who'd targeted the Tudors, but one more name, Amanda. The net of justice is wide, no one slips through. The police restored my innocence the moment I stepped out of the city police station. Before I could draw a breath of fresh air, countless camera flashes blinded me. Reporters, camped outside, thrust microphones at me, firing questions. Emily, what do you make of Amanda being the one who betrayed Group A? Emily, all those years by Thomas's side. Were you in love with him? Emily. When Thomas was paralyzed, it wasn't Amanda taking care of him. Who was it? Was it you? I could barely breathe, but a hand pulled me steady. John pressed flowers to ward off bad luck into my arms, carefully shielding me into the car. As I got in, I glanced back. Amid the chaotic media lights, I saw Thomas standing far off. Tired, haggard, fragile. I answered the reporter's last question. My voice soft, no. Back then, the one by Thomas's side wasn't me. I'd let him go. A long time ago. So much had happened in 10 days online. The vitriol had once screamed for my execution, but revelations kept coming. The first wave, photos of Amanda studying in Milan. Exposing her lies. Everyone learned she'd fled tumult on the moment Thomas was hurt. She'd lived in peace while he struggled worlds apart. People had shipped their love mostly for that low-point companionship story to find it was all a lie. A publicity stunt. Netizens were disgusted. The second wave, someone leaked the video of Amanda slapping me. It was clear enough to show my humiliation, me clutching my red cheek. Blocking Thomas's office door, only to be pushed to the ground. Amanda, who'd cultivated a gentle, bright image, looked unbridled. Even ferocious, her persona as a polished career woman. From workplace variety shows to social media shattered. Rumor had it she stopped answering calls, drowning in insults. More leaks followed, truth and lies tangled. Until the police announcement, I was innocent. Amanda was wanted. That notice spoke louder than anything. The interviewers who'd rejected me before reached out again, but I turned them all down. Even Percy's offer. I got a call from my hometown. The old principal of my middle school, a woman as respected as Mrs. Tudor, asked if I'd come back to teach. To support the county's education. I said yes. I returned to the Tudor house one last time. No one could stop me now. I'd left things behind before. I thought the room would be dusty, but when I opened the door, it was clean and bright, sunlight falling on a fresh bouquet on the desk. I packed quickly when I pulled open the last drawer. I hesitated, then pulled a photo from a hidden compartment. Taken with an old camera, it showed a teenage Thomas. High-spirited, the wind ruffled his hair. He was laughing with friends, walking ahead. But for some reason, he'd turned back. As if checking if the person behind was following. I'd snuck that photo when I was 17. Back then, I thought. No one can catch the midsummer wind, but I could photograph it. I left the photo on the desk, whether Thomas put it away or threw it out. His choice now. The jacker and a tree in the courtyard was blooming again. Its flowers hanging gently. I stood admiring it when Thomas spoke softly behind me. Emily, as if afraid to disturb a dream. I turned, smiling calmly at him. Thomas had dark circles under his eyes, stubble covering his jaw. That unyielding arrogance was gone, completely. As the tutor, I'd never seen him so tentative. Almost humble, his lashes fluttered. His voice hoarse. I started investigating the crash when I was almost recovered. But when I found clues pointing to you, I couldn't go on. Just thinking about that evidence hurt to breathe. I never thought you'd betray us. Once that thought took root, I couldn't stop it. He laughed bitterly. You know how it is. People like us get betrayed often. We were used to knives in the back. But with you I couldn't take it. Do you know what I thought when I read those files? I wished I'd died in that crash. Then I lost control, did those stupid things. That Century proposal, it was all for you to see. He talked for a long time, pouring out his thoughts. But I just looked at him, clear-eyed. And cut him off softly. No. Thomas froze. I smiled faintly. Deep down, you knew you were wrong when you did it. But you thought it didn't matter whether I'd betrayed you or not. Whether what you did was right or wrong, you thought I'd forgive you anyway. Truth was, I'd always known. If Thomas hadn't been paralyzed, if people hadn't deserted him, he'd never have noticed me. His eyes would have stayed on girls like Amanda. Even the ring he'd given me back, and had been the wrong size. He fell silent for a long time. I thought the shadows on the ground were from falling petals until I realized they were Thomas's tears. He grabbed my wrist, begging. I'm a bastard just this once. Can you forgive me? Dappled light filtered through the jacaranda leaves. I thought of long ago, when I was 17. Thomas leaning on the railing, smiling lazily. Emily, you like me? That now, I gently pulled my wrist free. I won't forgive you. He saw the grayish-brown scar on my wrist. His pupils contracted, his lips trembling. I obeyed it, but no words came. I spoke patiently. Like soothing a child. Thomas. Your life was saved because Mrs. Tudor shielded you in that crash. You have to live well. Group A was her life's work. You have to guard it. I'm leaving. Thomas's face drained of all color in that moment. His heart felt hollowed out. Someone he'd taken for granted was leaving. Forever. The midsummer wind. Never turning back. Recently, City C had seen upheaval. The so-called Century proposal couple. One labeled a scoundrel, the other a villain. Amanda's crimes, Thomas as accomplice. Group A stock plummeted for some reason. Thomas drove his car into a barrier, breaking his legs. Confined to a wheelchair again. I was on the bus back to the county when a text from Thomas' team. I'll repay everything I owe you. I deleted it, blocking his number. I turned to watch the scenery outside. The bus swaying just like when I'd first come. The window glass reflected the person beside me. John seemed to love sleeping. He was leaning back, eyes closed. A tycoon like him. Donating supplies to the middle school was one thing, but he'd insisted on squeezing into this bus with me. Escorting the shipment personally. I couldn't stop him. So I let him come. The bus jolted. And John's head fell onto my shoulder. He didn't wake. I smiled softly, looking ahead. The scenery changed, but I was sure my endless midsummer rests were coming.